In Module 1, we discussed a variety of topics designed to help you prepare for your time abroad. In this section, we'll look at ways to stay healthy and safe once you're overseas. Often students are inclined to believe that common sense will be a sufficiently comprehensive approach to any situation abroad. And while that's not inherently incorrect, it is critically insufficient. Remember, you are now a stranger in a strange land, and thus no longer part of what is considered common. What might work at home may not work in your host country. In this section, you'll learn about situational awareness and understanding identity and interpersonal interactions abroad, how the Ohio State Code of Student Conduct applies abroad, key areas of common sense that will need to be reframed in your new environment, using your supplemental insurance abroad, emergency protocol. In the following segments, we'll identify some of the main areas where student travelers are strongly encouraged to rethink what they know. What may work in Ohio may not work overseas. On campus, it can be hard to resist the urge to spend the walk or bus ride across campus with earbuds in and immersed in various distractions on your phone. Once abroad, however, it becomes more important that you disconnect from the device and pay attention to your surroundings. Petty theft and other crimes of opportunity are much more likely to occur when your attention is diverted. Technology isn't the only culprit. Too much alcohol can also gravely impair your ability to make good decisions and to read situations accurately. Quite in addition to being culturally inappropriate, public intoxication can compromise your personal safety and well-being. The Safety and Security section on the U.S. Department of State's country-specific information pages will highlight contexts in which staying alert is of particular importance in your host country. Examples might include such topics as ATM usage, public transportation, common scams, strikes and demonstrations, or restricted areas. Please review the information page for your host country well in advance of your departure. Generally speaking, students know how their identity works at Ohio State. There are both tacit and overt rules, expectations, and assumptions guiding how you understand your own identity as well as the identity of others. You are, in other words, pretty aware of how performances of gender, class, race, sexual orientation, religion, and ethnicity are sent and received on campus. What you may not know is how these markers will be understood in a new context, and you're strongly encouraged not to assume that circumstances will be the same as here. It's very likely that your destination has very different rules, expectations, and assumptions about any and all these identity markers, and being intellectually prepared for that likelihood can make a big difference in your ability to cope. The Office of International Affairs website has a section devoted to diversity and identity, and the Education Abroad Handbook has a number of resources that can help you get your research started. As mentioned in Module 1, the U.S. Department of State has a number of resources for students, LGBT, women, and travelers with disability. In addition, Diversity Abroad often has destination-specific resources for students with a variety of questions. The Code of Student Conduct continues to have jurisdiction over you even when you're off campus. The code exists in order to maintain Ohio State's high standards and to promote a safe and scholarly experience for all Ohio State students, wherever they're studying. In addition to the code, those traveling on Ohio State managed group programs may have additional requirements and standards outlined in a group expectations contract. Before departing, make sure you are well aware of the laws of your host country, the code of conduct, rules of your host institution if applicable, any homestay, hostel, or dormitory rules, or a group contract put in place by a program organizer. All of these may fall under the umbrella of the Ohio State Code of Student Conduct. If you're in violation of any of these, you could be found in violation of the code and thus subject to disciplinary sanctions. Although the full code applies while abroad, there are a few sections we'd like to highlight and clarify as they apply to an international setting. According to the code, if there are no program restrictions, local laws apply to the purchase and consumption of alcohol. If you're legally allowed to drink in your host country, you will not be in violation of the code as long as you continue to behave in a responsible, respectful manner. You're strongly encouraged to know and be aware of alcohol-related laws and statutes in your host country. Make no mistake, Student Life Student Conduct is not offering you a blank check to behave badly, dangerously, or illegally abroad. Students who choose to drink abroad are reminded to adhere to the buddy system when out and about, to respect their limits, and to know and observe local customs and etiquette. There are some instances in which the common sense you would employ at home works just as well overseas. Students who choose to drink abroad are encouraged to do so with the same caution that they would at home. Avoid accepting drinks from a stranger or leaving a drink unattended. Don't leave anyone alone or behind, and definitely do not drink to impairment. Under the Ohio State Code of Student Conduct, the use, production, distribution, sale, or possession of drugs in a manner prohibited under U.S. and Ohio law is prohibited conduct on an overseas program. This includes, but is not limited to, the misuse or sharing of prescription drugs. The use of prohibited drugs, even if permissible by local law, can lead to the dismissal from the program and subsequent discipline under the code. The code applies to sexual assaults that occur both on and off campus, including overseas destinations. Education abroad participants, both men and women, should be aware that Ohio State is committed to providing a living and study environment free from sexual harassment. Cultural norms surrounding gender roles and expectations are often different from those in the United States, and harassment may be particularly difficult to identify abroad. However, cultural sensitivity does not mean that you need to submit to behaviors that make you feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Educating yourself about sexual harassment, violence, and gender dynamics abroad can empower you to have a safe experience. We recommend the following guidelines for all travelers. Research the ways that gender is performed in your host country and consider how your own gender identification and performance may be different. Consider the laws and culture of your host country when you start packing, as clothing that's acceptable in the United States may be illegal or viewed as disrespectful abroad. Consider the ways that friendship and dating might be understood differently in your host country. What many Americans view as friendliness might be viewed as aggressive or romantic in other cultures. Remember to use the buddy system and to practice bystander intervention, especially at night or in unfamiliar areas. Stay in public places when meeting individuals you don't know well. Familiarize yourself with local laws that relate to sexual harassment and sexual violence. Some countries have laws against sexual intercourse outside of marriage that can even be applied to victims of sexual assault. If you're the survivor of a sexual assault abroad, Ohio State is committed to taking prompt and appropriate action in your support. We encourage you to report any incident of sexual assault to your local contacts. You're also encouraged to contact Ohio State's International Risk Manager via the 24/7 International Emergency Phone Line at 614-292-6677. Under federal Title IX requirements, any Ohio State faculty or staff member who knows of a sexual assault is required to take certain steps of action and to report the assault to the university's Clery and Title IX coordinator. If you report an assault to Ohio State faculty or staff, you can expect to be asked if you feel safe in the moment, and more broadly, in your location. If you do not feel safe in either context, measures can be taken for your continued safety. You can also expect to be asked if you need or want medical attention. The choice to seek medical attention is entirely the decision of the survivor. It's important to know that medical treatment will vary depending on the destination and the local laws and resources, and not all services may be available in all locations. Coverage for visits to a doctor or clinic, examinations, and medications is included in the GeoBlue insurance policy. Subject to certain conditions, the policy has coverage for ongoing medical care and counseling services. Additionally, students who report an assault to Ohio State faculty or staff can expect to be asked if they'd like to call the police or local authorities. The choice to file a police report is entirely the decision of the survivor. However, it's important to note that in some countries, local program or medical staff may be legally obligated to notify police of a known sexual assault. Ohio State faculty or staff can offer confidentiality, but not complete anonymity. Survivors will receive a notification of assistance and resources from the university's sexual violence support coordinators in Student Life's student advocacy. Ohio State is committed to providing support and resources for students who have experienced sexual violence. The survivor, however, is empowered to accept or decline the services. Survivors who are not interested or do not want to seek support services abroad are still eligible to seek support services when they return to Ohio State, such as making an appointment with a sexual violence support coordinator. While there are a number of health and safety considerations to consider when traveling abroad, the next section highlights certain categories of safety that all travelers should consider. As we mentioned earlier, common sense only works when everyone is on the same page. Once abroad, you might not only be on a different page, you may be in a completely different book. Where matters of sexual health and safety are concerned, it is really critical that you avoid making assumptions about how you're perceived and how you perceive others. What you might intend only as friendliness could be potentially interpreted as something significantly more serious. Similarly, it is enormously important that you make no assumptions about consent. Take the initiative and ensure that both you and your partner are back on that same page. If you're sexually active, we strongly recommend that you pack condoms, as condoms and other forms of birth control are not widely available in certain countries. You also don't want to make any assumptions that your partner is as educated about safe sex as you are. According to statistics gathered by International SOS, 2 to 10% of students acquire a sexually transmitted infection or sexually transmitted disease while abroad. Once again, take the initiative to protect yourself. According to information cited by the U.S. Department of State and the Association for Safe International Road Travel, road traffic deaths are the leading cause of fatalities among U.S. citizens abroad. These statistics refer both to drivers and passengers as well as pedestrians. At Ohio State, pedestrians enjoy the right-of-way, and those on campus often enter crosswalks engaged in conversation on their phones or wearing headphones. This should not be the assumption overseas, as traffic patterns, expectations, and behavior will vary dramatically. Here are a few rules of the road. Familiarize yourself with local traffic laws. Read and adhere to the advice laid out in the Department of State country information sheets about travel and transportation. Do not purchase, rent, or drive a motorized vehicle while abroad. The supplemental insurance will not cover injuries resulting from driving a vehicle without proper licensing. In the United States, there are a number of federal and local laws that have been handed down as a systematic approach to fire safety and prevention. These statutes are so pervasive that many Americans completely take for granted that any given building has smoke alarms, fire alarms, evacuation plans, fire extinguishers, fire escape, sprinkler systems, flame retardant building materials, and similar safety precautions. Do not assume that the country where you're traveling has similar statutes in place or as systematic an approach to fire safety and prevention, even in other highly developed countries. You've likely been trained in basic guidelines such as stop, drop, and roll, but don't neglect these other basics. Know your evacuation plan. If you're traveling with a group, come up with an evacuation plan that each traveler will observe, including a meeting place. Be aware of deterrents or barriers to exits, including bars on windows, locked doors, or other security features. Take the shortest and safest route out of the building, avoiding the elevators if possible, and close doors behind you. Stay low to avoid smoke and feel doors for heat before opening. If there's a fire or smoke preventing your exit, close the door and remain in the room. Pack towels under the door to keep the smoke out. Call for help and try to get an available window to attract attention to your location. Always know the local version of 911 and specifically the number for fire. In some countries, this number may be different than the one used to call the police. According to statistics cited by the U.S. Department of State, Drowning is the fourth leading cause of death among U.S. citizens abroad. It's not uncommon for students to travel to oceans, lakes, and rivers during their study abroad program. In many countries, there may be no lifeguards or signs warning of currents, tides, or other inherent dangers. Travelers should exercise extreme caution when swimming abroad, particularly in developing countries where emergency services may not be readily available. It's critically important that you observe basic safety guidelines around water. Never swim alone. Only swim in designated swimming areas and scrupulously observe any and all warnings. Check water conditions before entering, including temperature. Keep an eye out for warnings and notices, boat traffic, and poor water quality, etc. Understand currents, rip currents, and undertows, as these may not be obvious or even measurable until you're actually in the water. Keep an eye on weather conditions, as these can change quickly and can negatively impact swimmers. Don't jump or dive in without first knowing the depth of the water. Do not enter the water until you've clearly identified a safe place to get out. Stay close to the shore. Research the local sea creatures you might encounter. Sharks, stingrays, jellyfish, and the like can be quite dangerous. Anytime you're considering a swim abroad, first talk to the locals. They're in a much better position than you to know specific consideration about the area. In addition, acquaint yourself with information about identifying and surviving a rip current. In Midwestern states like Ohio, even the youngest students are drilled on what to do in case of a tornado. The reason for these drills is simple. Natural disasters, like tornadoes, can come quickly, and having a well-practiced and quick response can often make a huge difference in the outcome. Different places around the world are prone to different extreme events, so it's imperative that you do your homework before going abroad. Be sure to research what is common in the area where you're headed and how to respond. You'll also want to research what, if any, existing warning systems are in place in the area where you'll be located. It's dangerous to assume that all countries have the same warning systems in place that the United States does. We encourage you to think carefully about what you post online regarding your time abroad. Future employers, family members, and university officials could come across your social identity, which could have a negative impact on your future. Keep in mind that people in the United States are not the only ones watching these websites. Posting revealing information about yourself could make you a target, both in the United States and in the country you're visiting. To reduce the risk, consider disabling location services on your social media accounts and limiting the details of your overseas posts. When using your smartphone or laptop abroad, you're encouraged to be wary of unsecured Wi-Fi. Your personal and financial information should be protected as much as possible. Consider removing bank and other information-sensitive apps from your smartphone and tablet prior to heading overseas so that no personal information is unintentionally shared on a public or unsecured network. As we noted earlier, be very careful about where and how you access your funds. Unsecured online networks are a target for potential identity thieves. Additionally, please make sure to refer to the Safety and Security section of the U.S. Department of State's country-specific information pages for instructions on how to keep you and your finances safe abroad. In many countries, there will be specific notes about protocol for safety and security when using ATMs. Prior to traveling abroad, it's advisable to notify your bank and credit card companies of your upcoming travel. Travelers should know the numbers to call in case they need to cancel a lost or stolen card and know the feasibility of getting a replacement card or funds while abroad. In the event of lost or stolen funds, Ohio State cannot make personal loans to students. While speaking with your bank, inquire if they have partnership agreements with banks in your destination that may help you avoid high transaction fees. In many locations, those perceived as tourists are targeted by pickpockets. It may seem awkward or unfashionable, but it's highly advisable to use a money belt or other internal pocket for wallets and phones while carrying minimal amounts of local currency in a more accessible pocket. Traveling abroad is a wonderful opportunity to try new things and to push the limits of your comfort zone. It's important, though, not to throw caution to the wind and assume that all water is drinkable and all food is safe. A shocking number of people around the world do not have access to clean drinking water, and many more drink water to which they are immune but could wreak havoc on your system. Similarly, you may need to exercise caution with regards to certain foods, depending on how they've been prepared. The Centers for Disease Control offers destination-specific guidelines for eating and drinking safely. If it's necessary in the area where you're traveling, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention also offers boil guidelines for water. If you need to see a medical professional for care of a pre-existing condition, care for a sudden illness or injury, or to fill a prescription while abroad, you can consult the GeoBlue directory of local providers in the student portal via the GeoBlue M-Passport app or by directly calling or emailing GeoBlue Global Health and Safety Services. GeoBlue will list two types of providers: network providers and listed non-participating providers. There's no deductible and no copayment for your medical care covered by the supplemental insurance plan. Students can pursue medical treatment either from a network provider or a listed non-participating provider, and GeoBlue will ultimately cover 100% of any covered medical expense. How the payment works depends on which provider you choose. If you select a network provider, GeoBlue can have the cost of your medical care paid directly to the provider. In most instances, this will require you to contact GeoBlue in advance of care to provide a guarantee of payment. If the provider accepts the guarantee of payment, they will bill GeoBlue directly for the cost of your care. If you select a listed non-participating provider, an unlisted local provider, or if you don't contact GeoBlue in advance of a network provider visit, you'll likely have to pay the cost of your care up front and work with GeoBlue after the fact to be reimbursed. Please make sure to keep all receipts and documentation associated with your visit in order to support your claim for reimbursement. If you're traveling abroad on a program with Ohio State faculty and staff, be aware that they do not carry funds to pay costs for routine and non-emergency medical care in-country for students. Travelers should expect to cover these costs and are advised to have an accessible contingency fund or credit card with them to cover any out-of-pocket expenses. Keep in mind that even if a doctor or facility is listed in the GeoBlue directory, there is no guaranteed access to immediate medical care for routine and non-emergency medical needs. An appointment can sometimes mean long waiting times and missing a scheduled activity. Although you may not want to miss an item on your itinerary abroad, maintaining your health is most important, and you don't want to delay care and risk further complications. You should carry the following numbers, both in written form as well as entered onto any phone you're traveling with. Ohio State's 24/7 international phone line, which can accept collect calls from abroad. GeoBlue Global Health and Safety Services, which can also accept collect calls from abroad. The local equivalent of 911 for the country you're traveling in. Keep in mind that in many countries there may be a different number for police, fire, and ambulance. Also bear in mind that responders may not be proficient in English, and access and response times may vary depending on your location. The number for the local U.S. Embassy or consulate for the country or region you're traveling in. The number for your in-country contact. If you're traveling with an OSU-managed program, this should be the number for your faculty or staff resident director. A personal emergency contact for a family or friend back in the United States. Having these numbers handy will allow you to act swiftly in the event of an emergency. Depending on the nature of your situation, we recommend slightly different calling trees. If there's an emergency concerning your safety, call the local equivalent of 911. If you have a designated in-country emergency contact, such as an on-site director, faculty resident director, or other program leader, be in touch with this person as soon as possible. Call the Ohio State 24/7 International Emergency Phone Line at 1-614-292-6677. Be prepared to identify yourself as an Ohio State student traveling abroad. Provide your exact location. Provide contact information in multiple forms if possible, such as phone number, SMS, email, or Skype. Inform the responder of the issue and answer any additional questions requested. The Department of Public Safety will contact the International Risk Manager or another first responder to return your call and provide further assistance and instructions. If you need assistance identifying appropriate local police or security resources, contact the nearest U.S. Embassy or consulate, who can assist in identifying appropriate local government agencies and resources in the country where they work. If there's an emergency concerning your health, locate help. For urgent medical assistance, call the local equivalent of 911 or go to the nearest hospital or doctor. For non-urgent medical assistance, consult GeoBlue via the mobile app, their online site, or phone to locate the nearest available facility. When you contact GeoBlue, you'll need to provide your name, policy certificate number, the name, address, and phone number of the hospital or medical facility, and the name of any treating medical professional. You may be able to arrange a guarantee of payment for services. You'll benefit from GeoBlue's commitment to monitoring your care and its assistance with authorizing and arranging any continued care or additional support. If you have a designated in-country emergency contact, such as an on-site director, faculty resident director, or other program leader, be in touch with this person as soon as possible. If there's no on-site staff associated with the program, you're traveling independent of a group, or if you need any additional assistance, contact the Ohio State 24/7 International Emergency Phone Line at 1-614-292-6677. Keep in mind that in the waivers and release section, there's a FERPA release form to be completed. We only use that information if a traveler is unable to speak for themselves, they are perceived to be a danger to themselves or others, or when there is a significant health, safety, or security incident, such as civil unrest, active terrorism, or significant natural disaster. In all other instances, we expect travelers to maintain contact with their family unless a specific request has been made for the International Risk Manager or Office of International Affairs staff to be in contact. Your health and safety abroad are of paramount importance to the Office of International Affairs, and we strongly encourage you to begin thinking about both in the context of your upcoming travel sooner rather than later. In this health and safety module, we've outlined some of the major ways you can reframe how you think about common sense when you're abroad, how the Ohio State Code of Student Conduct applies abroad, what to do in the event of an emergency, and how to use your supplemental health insurance. In the next module, we'll talk about a few health and safety matters for your re-entry to the U.S. Please take a moment to complete the quiz